Welcome back to the Placeholder Podcast, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz. This week on the pod, we've got some Sepp Kuss, a little look at the 2024 Tour de France route, Taylor Phinney, the DJ, and of course, some weekly pain. Joining me today, welcome back after your, well, I don't really know how we're describing it, Dane. Welcome back, Dane. It's good to have you back.
Man, we could definitely describe it as a crash. I don't remember much else, but I know that I crashed. Yeah, thank you.
I feel like we can blame the driver. I don't feel like you probably just fell down on your own with the driver nearby.
I think that's true. I just don't really know if I got completely creamed or bounced off, and whatever happened, I then hit my head pretty hard, and that's why I don't remember.
No apparent lasting damage, we think?
To my head, apparently. Right? It seems like no. You may be the judge of that. I don't know. Tell me in an hour whether you think I'm podcast material still. The body's a little sore, a lot of sore actually.
Some rib action,
something going on down that way. The rib, oblique. I don't know. But you know what? All things considered, I'm happy to be here.
Good to have you back. And Kit Nicholson, what's the most recent movie you watched?
I watched a film called Another Country, which features a very young Rupert Everett and Colin Firth about the teenage years of one of the Cambridge spies. You're aware of who they were? Guy Burgess. They spied for Russia.
Rude.
It's a good film. It's very British 1980s, very clipped boarding school nonsense. It's kind of a fairly mindless viewing, but somewhat interesting as well.
You know that phenomenon where you hear about something and you're like, I don't know if I've ever heard of that before, and then you hear about it again moments later. Rupert Everett is in that Napoleon movie that Ridley Scott's making, and I looked him up because he's playing Arthur Wellesley, and here we are, within, I don't know.
That happens with me with words all the time. I've learned that word, and then somebody uses it the next day. It's great, isn't it?
I do the opposite with words, where if I hear it too much, I refuse to believe it's a word anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a real thing, too, for sure.
Yeah. Thing can't be a word. There's no way.
I did that with tomato once. I just lay on my bed and said tomato over and over again until it stopped being a word. I was about 8, but I remember it vividly.
There's a reason for that.
Good start to this off-season podcast, everybody. We have plenty of bike-related things to talk about today. The first of which, the Eagle of Durango, Sepp Kuss. This feels a bit weird, me asking one of you to tell me what he said, because he said it to me. But rather than me monologue, I think it's probably better if one of you tells me. So, what did Sepp say to myself and a couple other reporters when he was back home in Durango last week?
Well, I mean, he said a lot of things, didn't he, really? And I think one of the things that we like about Sepp Kuss is that he's more candid than a lot of riders, and you don't get the boilerplate answers too often. He'd like to be back at the Vuelta. He'd like to get another chance at leadership, which is good to hear, especially with his history. But he learned a lot about himself, he says, during his Vuelta defense. Learned a bit about his team as well, I imagine. And with that in mind, he also said of his soon-to-be former teammate, Primoz Roglic, that it's better for everyone that he's leaving. I read that as just kind of, it's good for us because it's, the politics are complicated and it's slightly streamlines the objectives, but it's also good for Primoz because he gets to be the absolute outright leader. So I read it more diplomatically than I think a lot of people have read it, including some of my esteemed colleagues on this podcast, I think.
I will say that he, like I said, he said it to me.
Exactly. Well, that's, so you've got the, you
I can provide a little bit more insight. I can provide a little more insight into body language and tone. I don't think there's a sort of vindictive bone in Sepp's body, but I will say that was the answer that he was kind of picking his way around most carefully. And so the wording was very much if you can read the quote out in a story, the wording is sort of like you said, it's good for him, it's good for us, it's sort of good all around, relatively magnanimous. He was more sort of fidgety, and the tone itself was more, I think, indicative of a relationship that is probably somewhat strained at this point, for good reason, right? This is a teammate that attacked him in the middle of a Grand Tour. I think that even though we describe Sepp as this nice guy all the time, he did find a bit of the killer during the Vuelta this year. He had to, really. And I think that fundamentally that has changed him. He's been willing to come out and say, like you said, Kit, he says, I want to defend my Vuelta title. And also, I'm probably going to go to the Tour de France. And if I go to the Tour de France, I don't necessarily want the full domestique role. I want to go, maybe as the sort of co-leader role alongside Jonas, much like Roglic would have previously. So I think that he is changing his view on the sport and sort of his place in it. And that answer is part of that. That answer, if we'd gotten that answer from a sort of more spicy, fiery Grand Tour contender, it would have been a little more spicy and fiery. I think that inside Sepp's head, like I said, I think that relationship is somewhat strained, and I think he's genuinely glad, not for Roglic's sake, but for, like, I don't have to deal with this guy anymore. I think he's pretty happy that Roglic has left the team. So given the fact that we've got Roglic in a new team, we've got Jonas Vingegaard and Sepp, who appear to have a pretty good relationship, and Sepp, who's now going to be pushing for more, right? Whatever that means. But also, I never have gotten the sense that he would want to sort of like elbow Vingegaard out of the Tour leadership, right? Like, that's not in his radar, and I think he's very realistic about his own sort of abilities on that front. But where does this leave us for Visma Lisa Bike next year?
I think this team and other, I mean, this was the late years of the Sky Ineos Grand Tour juggernaut. They have shown that you can actually succeed, or do quite well at least, with option 1 and option 2 for the Grand Tours. And I think with, as you point out, with Kuss, it's not like, this is not going to be a struggle for leadership at the Tour de France. I love that Sepp Kuss is from Colorado, and I want to see him succeed unabashedly, but
Free the Eagle, Dane.
Sorry,
why are you
I just don't think
caged?
he's good. But I also think that's probably good for the team dynamics, and I think everybody knows that. I think he goes into the Tour as a very clear super domestique, or option 2, maybe option 3 even. I don't even know if he counts as an option 2, but it gives them that option to send somebody up the road if they need to, which is what worked so well against Tadej Pogačar, the dual threat of Roglic and Vingegaard last year. Yeah, I think this is good for them.
Who's option 2 if he's not option 2?
Is it maybe Van Aert's green jersey?
I'm not saying that somebody else is in that place. I'm just saying I don't even know if he really counts as like a second option, because I just don't. Yeah, sorry, Sepp. He might listen to this podcast, and I really like Sepp Kuss, but I just don't see him being as that big of a contender for
He is a friend of Escape Collective. He was reposting us all weekend. I really appreciate that.
And he's a Grand Tour winner.
He has a lot more Instagram followers than we do.
And he also has like a
cool
bunch of KOMs around here where I live. So, yeah.
Yeah, those are all from college mostly. So he was in college in like sort of 10, 11, 12, something in there. And I was working at Velo News. That was like my first couple years of Velo News. And I remember myself and Neil Rogers like looking at Strava. That's also when Strava was starting to take off, right? Looking at Strava being like, who is this? Who is Sepp Kuss? who is this random kid? Now we know, of course. But those he's still got a couple of the big ones from 2012 or something like that. Unsurprisingly, I guess. He
knows how cycling works. He knows that to go to the Tour and to be in bloody good form and just to not lose time. Just like we said last week, there are a lot of riders who will be turning up at the Tour hoping that, well, not hoping maybe, not publicly anyway, but there are, somebody falls off. Somebody gets sick. Vingegaard, when he came second in 21, Vingegaard suddenly, despite having lost a couple of minutes in the first week, he suddenly found himself being the leader of the team and second best to Pogačar, or doing very, very well anyway. And so he was the heir to the throne. And I'm not saying that Sepp Kuss is going to go and win the Tour and then Vingegaard will do a Roglic, because I think Vingegaard is probably a little bit more of a long-term option. Not compared to Kuss, compared to Roglic. He'll go and he'll boss it at the Tour, and he clearly bucks the trend whereby you can't do back-to-back Tours and be better at the second and third.
Next year, there's more space in between the Tour de France and the Vuelta because of the Olympics, right? So they're going to be, the Tour ends on the 19th or 20th, I think, of July, which gives him basically a full month between that and the Vuelta, extra time. And he's not in any way interested in the Olympics because it's kind of a punchy classics course outside Paris, and it's not going to be Sepp's thing. So yeah, I think it's pretty likely that Kuss ends up riding both of those next summer.
It gives him extra time to just love life on his bike, which was another great part of that interview. He was just saying that the build up to the Vuelta was he was just enjoying himself. And that was a big change in this year. So he's felt good all year, partly just because he's been having fun.
Yeah, that seems to be a big thing. I read a whole piece on Friday about a phrase that is used in Durango Devo, which is the junior sort of development. I wouldn't even say development group, even though it's called Devo. It's not really development. Like, it starts with Strider bikes. Like, my 3-year-old is going to be in Devo next year. Yeah, it's not a development program until you get to kind of like the later stages of it. But the whole point of it, and one of the big sort of pushes behind it, is this phrase, never forget the feeling. Hashtag NFTF, if you want to search for that on Instagram. There's a lot of Devo stuff on there. Chad Cheney, one of the co-founders, is sort of one of the big proponents of this. And the whole idea is, and Sepp said this actually in the interview, like he's already forgotten the feeling of winning the Vuelta. It was so fleeting, right? But what he doesn't forget is the feeling of, riding well in the lead up to it and training hard and all these things that are more lasting. He basically says that's why he could do all 3 Grand Tours, is because he never forgot the feeling. He enjoyed his bike in the way that I think a lot of kids should keep in mind One of the bits of that interview that I didn't actually use was his sort of recommendation for young riders, for juniors. And his whole thing was slow down. Like, I mean, he went to school. He didn't really break through until his early 20s. I mean, he was fast as a kid. He won the, Durango High School Mountain Bike League back in the day and some other things that kids are trying to do these days. His whole thing was slow down. And I think that is very valuable. He said that if he had been sort of like cranking and going full gas as a 17, 18-year-old, he doesn't think he would have won this Vuelta. That's an important kind of through line to draw, right? Maybe it's 10 years ago, but he credits his perspective on the sport with winning a Grand Tour. And that's a pretty powerful message, I think, for any youngsters out there thinking about how to sort of make their way in the cycling world. If you got a lot of talent, you still have a lot of time, I think is the big picture. All right, so to wrap this up, the Eagle has been freed. How free is he going to be next year? And do you think he'll do anything? Can he defend a Vuelta title?
I think he can defend a Vuelta title. If that's the goal, I think it's an achievable goal.
Yeah, he's proved that he can, obviously. And the team have seen it too. And, the polemic around Kuss until the Vuelta was he doesn't actually want to be a leader. And, he was very happy to just be Kuss and just to ride his bike, have fun on his bike and to help his teammates. I mean, one of my favorite recent memories of Kuss from a, viewing perspective was his interviews at the top of the climb in the Giro time trial when Roglic won. And Kuss was interviewed about 3 times in a 15-minute space by the various media. And he was just chilling. I don't think he had a beer in his hand, but he might as well have. He was just really enjoying being there and watching his pal, maybe, Roglic, snatch victory. But now they are going to at least be able to build something around him if he wants it, which it seems like he does. It's whether he actually will be able to work with that plan, and whether he wants to, and whether that sort of, there will be more focus on the build up to a potential victory. But it'll be interesting to see how that works for him as the rider he is, and the person he is.
Once you've signed a few babies, you got to go win more.
Only one baby.
It was an incredibly new baby as well.
Yeah.
It was a 15-day-old baby, in fact. I didn't include that.
Well, you could see by the shape of it, his legs were still up by his ears.
Yeah. It's an exceptionally new baby. He did sign the onesie, to be very clear.
Yeah.
We don't let reality get in the way of a good Instagram caption, as I put underneath. He signed a baby. He signed one of his old cross-country skis. Because I feel like everybody in town has a pair of Sepp's old cross-country skis, or at least claims to.
He signed a hairy chest.
Signed a hairy chest. That was Chad Cheney's hairy chest, actually. Which, I mean, I wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if Chad went and got that tattooed over or something like that. What else did he sign? He signed a painted rock. He very nearly signed a boob. There was a boob that was placed adjacent to his signature. We'll leave it at that. He signed all kinds of fun stuff. He signed for like 2.5 hours. There were thousands of people here in Durango. We did a big bike parade around downtown. I think the official estimate was something like 2,500 people in a town of 20,000 people. Right?
It's really cool.
It's extraordinary. And everybody was on bikes and then he sat around for, we were expecting like a half hour of signing, and the line just kept going, and he just kept going, and like was telling the cops like, no, keep letting him through, and he got pretty much everybody, and it was cool to see. It was really cool to see. It's cool to see. And I also wrote this in the story, but like he's a reflection of the town, but the town becomes a bit of a reflection of him, right? Like it's this nice sort of symbiotic thing, and it just seems to work, and everyone loves him. All right, let's take a quick break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm actually going to be throwing to something we're going to record separately from the rest of the episode here. So we're recording on Tuesday. On Wednesday, right before this podcast comes out, Tour de France route is being announced. The 2024 Tour de France route. We know some things about it. We know it starts in Italy, blah, blah, blah. But we're going to, through the magic of editing, drop in a couple minutes discussing the 2024 Tour route.
All right, Kit, in between the show we did yesterday and this section of recording, we lost Caley on the pod here. He's busy, so it's just you and me today. We're going to have to really step up our game. The show must go on.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right, we have a Tour de France route for both Ulm and Fem. We have some thoughts of the overall look of these routes and maybe some specific stages that we wanted to highlight. So, first off, what do you think of the men's tour route? What are your overarching impressions? What stands out to you?
Well, first things first, and it makes sense to start at the beginning. I love the Tuscan start, the Italian start. Got family there, so maybe I'll stretch it out and have a few extra days in Italy, which is never a bad thing in June.
I think Christian Prudhomme actually, that's what he wanted.
To have a holiday.
I think he wanted to give you a chance. Yeah, that's what my sources say.
I'd like to think that's true. Yeah, that'd be nice. So yeah, a lovely visit to Italy, and then from Italy going straight through the Alps into France leads me to another of my main takeaway, I think, is that it actually, although obviously it's not literally point to point, starting and finishing in the same town every day, it is more of a singular route with no long transfers or flights to some other part of France. Although I'm sure that some of the big teams will find a reason to get into a helicopter. It's a very different Tour de France route, and obviously it finishes in Nice, so it's going to tell us a different story, which will be fun.
Yeah, the race doesn't really visit much of northwestern France at all. I mean, it doesn't visit northwestern France, really. It stays generally kind of in the central and largely in southern France. What about the riders that are going to kind of thrive on this course? Because I think that, to me, this looks relatively like, I think balance is the word here. You got 2 time trials. Both individual time trials, thankfully. You don't have any super long flat TTs, but you'd also, it's enough that I think you're going to need that skill set. So to me, it just sort of looks very much like a all-rounders kind of race. And maybe for more reasons than just the climbs and the TTs, because there's also some, punchy challenges, and of course, gravel, because it's
yes,
2024.
Indeed. Yeah, I think the time trials are going to be interesting. And is it the penultimate day or the final day? It's the final day, isn't it? Of course, with a couple of climbs, so it's not an easy finish. And wouldn't it be nice if there were changes made on that last day? It's 34 kilometers with 2 climbs, including the Col d'Ez. But yeah, I think as a whole, we visit the Galibier on stage 4. It's a race that you cannot save everything for week 3. So it really is going to be that, there's got to be longevity. And we know 2 riders in particular who that works for, as long as they're not injured. Vingegaard and Pogačar both being pretty good over, from the start. So there are some horrendous climbing days. One in particular, the Queen stage, with 3 climbs over 2,000 meters, which is going to be utterly brutal. And a couple of riders who I think might struggle there, especially as it comes so deep in the race. But then again, that particular rider, who you might be able to guess, will be wearing the rainbow bands for the time trial. So he will be going with that string to his bow. It'll be interesting to see who thrives over that period of time and who doesn't.
It's the 8 in the morning hour here. I really had to rack my brain to remember who won the TT. Who won the rainbow bands. I'm
sorry.
that was a very it was like a quiz.
I didn't want to explicitly be a downer on Remco Evenepoel, although I will say this, maybe earlier this year I would have said, seeing this route, no chance, he's not going to make it. But I think what we've learned this year is that Remco Evenepoel, first of all, he knows how to put together a training plan and stick to it. I think it seems like he's very good at getting to a fitness. Obviously that didn't quite work out at the Vuelta, but he's also a dogged and determined racer. So I won't be surprised if he turns up and he's brilliant at the Tour de France. And that will,
me neither.
Yeah. Whether he can sustain it for that 3 weeks, because he's going to have to, and it will be the 3rd Grand Tour he's ever completed, assuming he doesn't go to the Giro, which would be a huge surprise. Yeah, I'm not writing off Remco as I might once have done, but it'll be he's going to have his work cut out.
Yeah, as you point out, it's hard from the start. There's some challenges early on. That said, I do think that 3rd week is really where the vast majority of the really tough stuff is.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're going to have to wait completely for any action whatsoever, but I do think it's still pretty backloaded, as opposed to the Giro, which really spread the challenges across the race and put a lot of them in the middle of the race. This is going to be a race where you got to be on your game in the very beginning, but I do think that last week, with some of those really, really tough climbs down in southern France, that's going to be where this race is decided. What are the stages that really stand out as the big ones to you for this race?
Well, there's the interesting stage, one of the more interesting stages, perhaps, and also it'll be very pretty, is stage 9, the Troy stage, with its 30-something kilometers of white roads and 2,000 plus meters of elevation gain. So that'll be interesting. There are lots of questions already going around. Does gravel have a place in the Tour?
And just, if you're listening at home, I want you to be prepared for a real overabundance of champagne-related language in your race reports and in really everything that happens that day. There's going to be a lot of that, because that's where that is.
Yeah, my brief comment on does gravel have a place in the Tour de France? I think given that so little separates some of the best riders at the moment, I think it's perfectly fair enough to put something spicy in there to challenge them further. A bit like putting cobbles in there, when the gaps are small. Not that they were this year, sorry. But, I think it'll be a good day out, and it being in June, it'll be very beautiful.
I actually kind of more okay with a little bit of gravel than with cobbles. To me,
true, yeah.
I think that the gravel introduces a new challenge without quite as much of the risk of chaos and carnage and crashes. And I never will want to see a big contender crash out, but I wouldn't mind seeing them have to take on the slightly different challenge of racing on gravel, which, that's what the roads that people raced on 100 years ago were. So we're just going back to our roots.
Yeah.
What's the climbing, what are the climbing stages that stand out?
I think the most interesting climbing stage to me is, I've got a soft spot for the Tourmalet, which is stage 14. It's in the middle of the stage though. Just to go back to stage 4, what's fun about stage 4 is that it finishes with a descent to Valois, and I've done that descent and it is incredibly rapid. That's where I've reached my highest ever speed on the bike. So that'll be heart in your mouth sort of viewing, probably for a breakaway, possibly. Who knows? But yeah, the biggest stage that I'm interested in, that I'm excited about, is stage 19, which features the Col de la Bonnette and 2 other massive climbs.
Col de Vars, and then they finish at Isola, which is a ski station.
Exactly. And so it's 3 climbs over 2,000 meters. And the Bonnette is something like 2,700 something. And made famous by the Eagle of Toledo, Federico Bahamontes. So maybe we'll see the Eagle of Durango taking a stage up there.
That would be...
Not on the Bonnette, obviously, because it doesn't finish there, but it would be a lovely story.
Yeah, I would not complain.
What about you, Dane? What stands out to you?
I do think that final TT, the fact that we're not going to finish with a sprint, is a big deal. This is so weird for the Tour de France because we are just so conditioned to expect that last stage to be a sprint in Paris, and yet instead we're going to get this TT in Monaco to Nice, sorry, and there's some climbs. The Col d'Ez is we see that all the time in Paris-Nice. I really think that a 34K TT coming after, it's sort of the 1-2 punch of like that really hard final week. Stage 19 is super hard. Stage 20 is also very hard.
Yeah. And
then you still have to have something in the tank for that TT. So it's kind of like the accumulated fatigue is going to matter a lot there. And we do have, I think, the biggest contenders for the Tour de France this year, and just sort of in general right now, they're all really good time trialists. Pogacar and Vingegaard are excellent against the clock, but it's just kind of hard to prepare for a TT after challenges like that. So I think that's a big question mark is, will this race really come down to that final day? And I think there's a decent chance that it does with all of the difficulties of that final week accumulating on one another. Yeah. So I've made no secret of my appreciation for time trials. And of course there's one on stage 7 as well. And I think it's going to be interesting. Once they finish those climbs, they still have that one big challenge.
Got a feel for the sprinters, though, in that
Mark
last
Cavendish
week.
Seems to think it's a hard race.
Yeah, he said something. Didn't he say something like it's the hardest Tour de France he thinks he's ever seen? Which is a big statement. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be he has. I wouldn't want to be a sprinter looking at that and thinking, I want the green jersey, but I've got to do that bloody great mountain stages and finishing with a time trial. It's like, work for your dinner.
And there are a number of potential, flat finishes for the sprinters, but a lot of them do have climbs on the way. So
yeah.
Maybe the sorts of stages that a Wout van Aert type rider might enjoy, but a Mark Cavendish would like a little bit less. All right, we should talk about the women's tour route. What do we think? What stands out?
Yeah, so we've got an 8-stage race over 7 days, so which means we've got a split day. But we've also got it's only 3 out of the 8 stages take place entirely within France. But most of the race essentially is in the Netherlands, which I understand the criticism of that. But it's an international sport. There are some fantastic Dutch riders who bring a lot to the women's side of the sport, and have also,
particularly in the women's peloton. I mean, this is home for so many of the big
exactly.
stars.
Yeah, I mean, part of the presentation was how many. I think it was 6 out of the last 8 Tour winners in its. So in the various guises that women's Tour de France has taken, 6 and 8 have been Dutch. So that's a pretty big. I mean, we all know Demi Vollering, Annemiek van Vleuten, Anna van der Breggen. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. But yeah, so it looks like it'll be a very diverse race. It's got lots going on, flat stages. There'll be wind potentially in the Netherlands. A short time trial. There's a classic stage in the Ardennes. And what will hopefully be as emblematic and iconic and fantastic as a spectacle that it's always, whenever it appears, the Alpe d'Huez on the last day. So it should be a good race. Maybe it should be more in France, but looks like it'll be a good race.
The fact that they were able to squeeze some pretty major climbing challenges into 7 days, 8 stages, because there's that day where there's basically stage 3 and 2 and 3 are on the same day. But yeah, the fact that they were able to squeeze in, I mean, some cool Ardennes climbs, and then they're climbing to Le Grand Bornand on stage 7, and then Alpe d'Huez. I mean, that's a lot of climbing for just 8 days that they managed to kind of put in here. And to me, it does, by the way, look like a climber-friendly race, because the time trial is short enough that I mean, there's not going to be big gaps across 6K.
It's also, I mean, first of all, that makes sense of why it's a split day. Because when I first thought, I thought, that's a prologue in the middle of the race. But it also, I mean, the women's peloton, the World Tour teams are fantastic and they've got great support. But some of the, if you look at the spread at the Tour de France, time trialing is not one of the priorities of some of the smaller teams. So it gives more riders a chance to have an impact in the second half of the race. So that in itself is, and it's a power time trial. It's not for climbers. But it's I actually quite like that it's short.
I personally love short time trials because it's a skill set that we just don't often see, and I really like when you get some of the sprinters or riders who are power sprinters who suddenly have a chance to win a non-sprint stage, more or less. I mean, it's a time trial, but you get riders who can hold their power for less than 10 minutes can win a stage. I guess we kind of already pointed out that the big stages, that we're interested in. The Alpe d'Huez finale sure looks fun, and I think it's going to be an opportunity for, well, I mean, personally, it's hard to look past Demi Vollering there, but that's going to be where everybody is going to be watching Demi Vollering.
Yeah, hopefully Nira Doma can show her stripes again, and I think she probably gained a lot of confidence this year, and with a bit more of a devotion to that, there'll be more riders potentially able to compete with Vollering, which would be nice to see.
Yeah, well, it's October, so 8 months.
Looking forward to it. It'll be here before we know it.
All right, back to the other part of the show that we've already recorded, magic of editing.
Welcome back, everybody. Time for our news hits. This is what's going on this week. We got the big news. We got small news. Some of the bigger news is that Ineos is finally starting to put pen to paper in a couple different places. Yeah, Geraint Thomas officially signed for 2 more years, which I think is quite interesting. Keeps sort of threatening to disappear and then not. What else is going on over at Ineos, Dane?
There was very little official information about whether this team had, more than like 10 riders next year. And now Geraint Thomas is the big one this morning. And then not that long ago, Carlos Rodriguez as well, the rider who finished 5th at the Tour de France, won a stage. I just named him my Unheralded Rider of the Year in the Pretty Serious Bike Racing podcast, which is a shameless plug for the show I just recorded yesterday with Cosmo and Ruth. Go listen to that. So they have now locked in their 2 big, talented GC-type riders for the future, one of whom is a older gentleman, Geraint Thomas. In the twilight of his career, he's been using the phrase twilight of his career for a little while now, and he's now got 2 more years of twilight. And then Rodriguez, a much younger rider. So I think we can at least say Ineos is going to be doing what they did, more or less this year and the year before. A lot of the same riders. We start to see that now. It's been a long time coming before we've gotten those acknowledgments that they do have those riders re-signed. Geraint Thomas, the question for me was more 2 years. I kind of figured it would be 1 year at most, right up to the Olympics maybe, and then, call it. But I guess he's happy to be here for 2 years.
Am I forgetting? Am I misremembering? Was his last contract only a 1 year extension?
He was on a 2 year deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought it was a 1 year deal, which of course would suggest that he was sort of like, all right, I'll do 1 more year, which is what we were all kind of assuming is what would happen with this one. And then, unusual that he went for 2.
If Geraint Thomas is in the twilight of his career, where is Froome?
Night.
It's night. It's
deep,
dark.
Dark, midnight. Yeah. Maybe there's something in this new contract whereby he's with Ineos for 2 years, but he might transition into admin. Doesn't sound right, but a staff role. Maybe that's a potential. Because I think I would wonder if he said he never wants to go to the Vuelta again, but I wonder if he saw the Giro route and thought, all the whippersnappers are going to go to France. Maybe I can have 1 more go at Grand Tour. And then if that doesn't work out, I'll be like, okay then guys, I'll get in the car for 25. It's happened with a couple of riders who have, signed. Well, I think Froome's contract originally was going to be this really ridiculously long contract where he might transition into a different role.
Valverde's the same. He's
right,
got an arrangement with that team, Movistar, that even though he doesn't race on the road anymore, well, first of all, he still crushes it on gravel, of course, but also I think he's going to be with that team as an advisor for a while.
He'll be on that team until he's stuffed and put on the dashboard.
Probably, yeah. Geraint Thomas, in the twilight of his career, but lest anyone forget, he was extremely close to winning a Grand Tour this very year.
Exactly.
He got so close before Primož Roglič overhauled him, and that, I think, has to motivate Thomas. As he was telling journalists when talking about his re-signing, every offseason he has to go through this process where, much like the rest of us, certainly like me at least, he gains some weight in the offseason, and then he's got to lose it to get down to racing weight. And I certainly empathize with that, although I think he does it more than I do even. And that's not fun. It's hard to do. He said, that's a big challenge for him. But the fact that he was second on the Grand Tour this year, I think probably motivates him a little bit to keep doing it.
I wonder if the timing of this re-signing, I wonder if he was waiting for Cav to announce that he was staying around, because he's got to be at races to help with Cav's lead out.
Oh yeah, that's a great point.
The only reason he's racing is just to go to the Tour de France next year and help secure 35.
Cav is a good reminder though, because Cav is another fellow Olympic type. Thomas has said that he's interested in the Olympics for Paris next year. So that is another thing that that is motivating him to continue.
Okay, but there's still a real dearth of actual, signed human beings at Ineos. We have, what do we have, 9 or something now with... We keep asking this question in the podcast and not being able to answer it, but do we have any additional information on what on earth is happening in Ineos, or are we still confused?
Is it just because Jim Ratcliffe's busy signing other papers at football clubs? Maybe.
I think they're into the teens now on signings, and they have enough quality. I mean, Pidcock, Rodriguez, Ghana, and Thomas, and let's not forget Egan Bernal. They have enough riders that it seems like if they just sign a few more sort of domestiques and maybe 1 or 2 other big names, I think we can confidently say, actually, I don't think that much is going to change from what we saw this year in this roster. I think we're going to see a similar team next year.
They're just waiting to re-sign people?
Maybe they're
just waiting to extend people?
They're just waiting to announce, for maximum PR effect, maybe. Hey, you asked and we don't know the answer. I'm trying to come up with answers here, boss.
I like Kit's theory that Jim Ratcliffe, and it is worth noting that Ratcliffe is sort of relatively involved in I think his son is pretty heavily involved in the media communications
He was.
side.
I don't think he's on I think somebody scooped that he's disappeared from the website. Maybe.
He's moved on. Yeah. So, Ratcliffe is currently in the process of purchasing 25% of Manchester United, the Premier League team. Dave Brailsford keeps getting mentioned in these stories and from sort of the soccer football journalism world. And part of that 25% is Ratcliffe and Ineos are going to actually take over football operations, as they call it. And it seems very likely that Brailsford is going to be involved over there as sort of trying to fix this sort of mess that is United, if you do follow that sport. So yeah, I think maybe just some attention elsewhere, but it's still Rod Ellingworth is still running the ship over there, and he should have a budget and the ability to do these things. And I still find the whole thing just quite strange.
There are a lot of riders still out of contract in the whole peloton for next year. Maybe they are trying to, I don't know, they could be doing a rejig. Like Dane said, we are grasping at straws now.
Who won Lifetime Grand Prix, Dane? We don't talk about this very much, but it wrapped up over the weekend.
Yeah, so it's been
wrapped up for a month, technically.
Yeah, the last race was this past weekend, so we got to see one final dirt battle, but the standings were such that we already knew who was going to win the overall title. So the overall winners were Keegan Swenson and Sofia Gomez Villafane. They have won quite a few dirt, gravel, whatever you want to call it, because gravel doesn't really fully encompass the series, because of course you do have Leadville and Schwamigan. But yeah, they've been very, very much at the forefront of this sort of rising scene in the U.S., and they were your winners of the series this year. The Big Sugar race, which was the last event on the series, was in fact won by the new gravel world champion Kasia Niewiadoma on the women's side, which I think it's great that she came to the U.S. to do this race with the burgeoning gravel scene here, and did what you kind of expect her to do. She's a World Tour star, and she quite handily won the Big Sugar gravel race. On the men's side, Torbjorn Roed is my best attempt. I looked this up. So it's the Danish word for red. And I feel like I pride myself on my ability to attempt pronunciations, and this is a really hard one. So it's not Torbjorn Roed, but that's what I'm going to say is his name. Apologies, because Danish is surprisingly hard for this Dane. And congrats for winning this race.
-5 points. I'm
rusty. Come on.
Unacceptable.
It's all right. He's not running on full capacity. We can pass. We can let that pass.
I also played that card on pretty serious this week. I don't know how long I could play that card, but yeah.
Yeah, it looked like a fun race. Big Sugar is always a fun race. I think we're trying to decide whether we want to pay more attention to the Lifetime Grand Prix next year or not. One of the funny things I think about it is I've spoken with a lot of the athletes in the Lifetime Grand Prix, and a lot of them don't like gravel racing that much. It's just really funny thing where I think gravel racing is a fantastic thing to do as an amateur, because you go out, you have fun, eat some bacon, take a whiskey hand up halfway. You finish and you feel good about yourself. And if you're a pro, and most of these pros come from other disciplines, remember, they come from mountain biking or they come from road, they're generally used to much shorter races. If you're a pro, it's just 7 to 12 hours of utter pain because the races are fast these days. And I feel like every time I talk to one of the sort of top gravel riders, you turn the mic off and they're just like, I kind of want to go back to whatever, cross-country racing, whatever they came from. But it's where all the money is. It's where all the industry money is at the moment. And so like they kind of have to chase it around. Not only is the Lifetime Grand Prix prize not bad, although it's also not huge if you're traveling yourself around all these events. That's what their sponsors want them. That's where it's this whole ecosystem, right? But it's just funny to me that the athletes themselves seem relatively unexcited about a lot of these events, like way less excited than I would be as a just rank amateur to go ride them. Like I would love to go ride Big Sugar. It looks super fun. Course looks amazing. I would have a great day. But again, it's these events are still fundamentally designed for us, not them. That's sort of, I think, one of the fundamental weirdnesses and problems in gravel. And I think it'll shake itself out at some point, but it's also why I kind of like the fact that the UCI is getting involved in gravel, because their version is actually what I think most of the pros would want. I was speaking with one of the riders for the US team that went to Gravel Worlds recently, and he was saying that, this is what a gravel race should feel like. It was chaos, it was crazy, but it was a bike race, and it was not pretending to be anything but a bike race. It was not a mullet protocol, it was not anything else, it was just a bike race, and these are professional athletes. So I kind of like the split. Leave the fun side of gravel to us who just want to have fun, and create a more serious version for people who want to go fast and ride hard. Let's take a quick break. Welcome back, everybody. It is time for your favorite segment of the Weekly Placeholder podcast. It's time for Weekly Pain. I used the excuse last week that Dane was out because he crashed adjacent to a vehicle.
I'll jump in. It's my fault.
Yeah.
I was going to reach out to people, try to get some members on the show to engage us in a Weekly Pain battle. And I really only attempted to do this as of yesterday because I really only kind of fully came back yesterday, and I just didn't have enough time to cobble together, a roster of potential challengers here. So apologies to all of you who are listening, but also, come on, I crashed really hard and I don't remember, so sorry.
So one of the things we've asked for, so we do have there's a form that you can fill out if you're on the Discord to be a competitor in Weekly Pain, and one of the things we asked for is a one weird fact about yourself, which is basically so we can introduce you with a weird fact, and some of the weird facts are fantastic. So I really can't wait to share those weird facts with you. We will do this next week. Dane, don't get hit by any more drivers, please, and we'll kick this off next week. But we do have two of you this week.
I'm going to try not to get hit. Also, I should point out that James Huang took a close look at my bike to make sure that it's okay. And a couple of things. First of all, if you out there, listeners, have a tech editor in your lives, you use the tech editor's skills whenever you can, because it's pretty great when you end up having a serious incident. That said, my bike seems to be okay. The long-term health of the bike seems to be good. However, my chainring is so worn, which has nothing to do with this crash, by the way, that it needs to be replaced
Dave Rome's
immediately
right now.
Because the chain literally, it's to the point where, the shifting is bad enough. But anyway, long story long, I don't think I'm going to be riding anytime soon. So I don't think I'm going to get hit in the near future. Well, at least on the bike. I guess that could happen while I'm walking or driving somewhere. Anyway, I will be doing my job and getting some listeners to join the fun here.
Let's keep collisions to a minimum, and we'll get some members on next week to challenge somebody. They get to challenge whoever's on next week, which will probably be some combination of Dane, Kit, and Ronan. So you got to decide ahead of time who you want to challenge. But anyway, we've got the two of you today. We have an internal Weekly Pain. Before we go anyway, just as a reminder, current standings, we've got Johnny in the lead with 7 points, followed by Kit in second with 6 points, followed by Ronan with 5, and then tied for last, we have Ian and Dane. So Dane, this is an opportunity. If you win this one outright, you take all 3 points, you could move yourself up to tied for first in the league table. This is a big moment. So we've got 2 quizzes for you today. Up first, this is a game of categories. Of course, you just have to give me whatever correct answers you can come up with in this particular category. Your category is riders who have won stages in all 3 Grand Tours since 2010. So not necessarily in the same year, but they have to have won a stage in all 3 Grand Tours since 2010. There are 40 of them.
Whoa.
No, wait, 30. Sorry. There are 30 of them. Still a lot. Let's kick off with, well, Kit, since you are leading Dane in the overall, you go first.
Not how it works in time trials.
Should we go the opposite way? Kit, since you are leading Dane in the overall, Dane, you go first.
Thomas DeHent.
Yep, correct.
Magnus Cort.
Yes, correct.
Primoz Roglic.
Correct. He has 4 Giro, 3 Tour, and 12 Vuelta.
Funny how blank your mind goes. This feels like it
felt
should
the
be a
same way.
really
Yeah.
easy one. Chris Froome.
Correct. 2 Giro, 7 Tour, 5 Vuelta.
Alejandro Valverde.
Yeah, I don't even have to look. Yes, definitely.
Caleb Ewan.
Yep. It's a shocking number of people that have done this. Riders that have done this. Maybe I should have narrowed the time frame slightly. This is going to take a while.
Peter Sagan.
Yep. 2 Giro, 12 Tour, 4 Vuelta.
Simon Yates.
Yep. 6 Giro, 2 Tour, 2 Vuelta.
What's the time frame we said?
Since 2010. So like the first of those stage wins had to come after in 2010 or since then.
Yep. Okay.
Which is kind of a hint for one person anyway.
Or Cavendish.
Correct. You got the hint.
Wout Poels.
Not Wout Poels. All right, Dane, you have to get one. And if so, you get the first point.
Okay, wait. Do it. I have to get one. That's the rule here.
Yeah, you got to get one right now.
Well, except that he was the first to go.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You still got to do it.
It's tough.
This is a dictatorship, remember?
I will say Andre Greipel.
Correct. We have 7 Giro wins, 11 Tour wins, and 4 Vuelta wins.
Ooh.
Well done, Dane. You get the first point. All right, on to our second game here. This is another game of categories. We are looking for the most DNFs in Grand Tours. I'm looking for anybody in the top 10 in all of history for the most DNFs in Grand Tours. And we will kick off with Kit. 3 seconds.
I don't really know where to start.
I'll give you both a hint since nobody has answered yet. Think sprinters.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but then I was
the
trying
people that tend to DNF a lot.
Like, I know who you're hinting at. I'm really hoping Kit doesn't get it, because other than that one person.
I'm going to have to cut you off here, Kit. We got 3 seconds.
I don't know. I've
3,
just done so many Grand Tours. I'll say
2.
Mark Cavendish. It's not right, because he tries to win green jerseys.
Nope. Incorrect. But you're not actually that far off. The difference between so Cav has 10 DNFs in Grand Tours.
Mario Cipollini is the guy you were hinting at, right?
That is correct. Mario Cipollini is 1, and so Dane, you get all 3 points. Congratulations, you are tied for first.
Take that, Johnny.
This is big stuff. All right, so now we've got Dane and Johnny tied for first with 7 points, followed by Kit with 6, followed by Ronan with 5, followed by Ian with 4. Not really Ian's fault. He's very rarely on the podcast. Do you want to know the other top 10 DNFs?
Oh, yeah. Why not?
So we've got Mario Cipollini with 21
Wow.
Grand Tour DNFs.
Well, he famously turned up to a Grand Tour because the race wanted him there, and he did one stage, no?
That's one of them.
And he just notoriously, like, this is back in the old days when Grand Tours often had these big first weeks of nothing but sprint stages, and then he would just leave, right? So he finished 6 Grand Tours. He started 27 of them.
Wow.
Followed by Alessandro Petacchi, another Italian sprinter in the same mold with 15 DNFs of 32 starts, so a better hit rate there. We've got Jan Kursapuu, who started 15 Grand Tours and DNF'd 15 Grand Tours.
Wow.
So bad vibes from Jan Kursapuu. Fabian Cancellara DNF'd 14 of his 21 Grand Tours, which I didn't think of. Robbie McEwen DNF'd 14 of his 26. Jan Svarada DNF'd 14 of his 24. Oscar Freire, 13 of 17. Tony Martin, 12 of 21. Now, Tony Martin was basically just because he kept falling off, I think, if I remember correctly.
But he also doesn't have the incentive to stick around to... If his team leader's gone, he's not sprinting, he's not going for a jersey.
Yeah,
so.
he just sort of pull out. Fabio Baldato is 9th with 12 of 25. And then Mark Renshaw was you were close.
It's a good thing that I got Cipollini, because I would not have gotten any of those.
No, neither would I. When the members come on, they don't get to hear the category first, do they? So they, if it's a history or a more historic, category, they choose me because I will lose.
No, they have no idea what
They've no
categories
idea.
mean.
Good.
It could be tech. You never know.
Well, then that'd be equally
Like in
stupid.
particular, if Ronan is on with one of you, I absolutely am going to have some tech questions, and then you don't know whether you got to pick whether you're going to go up against Ronan or one of you guys.
Good.
And if you're going up against tech, then you're just you're doomed, basically.
Ronan's breadth of knowledge, though, is pretty wide. I feel like his ranking, his standings they don't reflect that he is actually quite knowledgeable about quite a lot of things.
That's because he panics. He hates this
I
round.
think that's true. I think it's that. Being on the spot.
He really hates the quiz. Ronan's just been a fan of the sport for a very long time. I think he's like, similar to me. Like we started watching this silly bicycle racing thing in like 1996, and you have a lot of random information wedged in the back of your head when you've done that. But anyway, it is time for us to wrap up for today. Thanks to all of our members out there who make this podcast possible. As a reminder, we have a couple new members-only options. We're going to imminently be launching members-only versions of Geek Warning, so that's going to be like a pretty cool Insider Ask Mechanics segment. We also have the brand new members-only Performance Process podcast with Ronan and myself, but mostly Ronan. This last week, we interviewed Matthias Heibor, who is the head of performance at Jumbo Visma, and basically asked him, how did you go from winning 6 races in like 2015 to winning 70 and 3 Grand Tours in 2023? And his answers were quite interesting. He was more open than we thought he'd be. So if you're not already a member, go sign up. Once you signed up, you will get an email explaining how to get those member-only pods. You can't listen to them if you're not a member. At least you can't listen to the whole thing, I should say. We did put half of the Hybor episode up last week. With that, thanks Dane, thanks Kit. We'll see y'all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye everybody.